Hey, I am Liz Gabriel, and I am so excited to have been featured on Next Level Conversations. And I want you to check out this episode and find out how you can avoid getting distracted by attractive, glittery projects and getting you off track from what you're really meant to do, your real purpose. So check it out.
Do you struggle with completing things? Sometimes we can be hot on the trail of our goals, and then things happen in life that get us distracted. And if you are a person that struggles with completing your task or making it to the finish line because you are so distracted by all the things around you, tonight is the show for you. And this is the woman you want to talk to. I am Shante, your host of Next Level Conversations, and I want to thank you for joining me tonight for an inspiring, uplifting, and an encouraging conversation to help you take your life from where it is to where you want it to go. Tonight, we are talking about how to overcome distractions. And joining me here in the studio is Liz Gabriel, who is going to be sharing with us some of her tips, a five-step, I'm going to say almost surefire plan to help you stop being distracted by what she calls, and what I love, attractive distractions.
Yes.
Liz Gabriel is an empathic artist who uses her creative talent to tell stories that heal. Her stories are told in spaces as an interior designer, in songs as a songwriter, and in memoirs and blogs as an author. So tonight, I don't want to tell too much about her. I want her to tell about all the fascinating things that she does. I want you all to help me welcome Liz Gabriel. Liz, thank you so much for joining me tonight. How are you?
Yeah, I'm wonderful, and thank you for having me. Well, it's an honor.
I am honored that you said yes. You didn't have to, and I appreciate you so much for taking the time to say yes and to come talk to us. Before we fully jump into our conversation on tonight, can you tell our audience just a little bit about you, about your background, interior design, song, just some of you have a fascinating life. I'm just gonna say that. I mean, a fascinating life. She has a full video and everything. I mean, you are fascinating. And so can you just kind of tell us, just give us a little background on Liz?
Okay, so I am an Egyptian American raised in Texas. I am married to the same man for 33 years.
Oh, wow,
I
congratulations.
have 2 incredible adult children, and all of that is what I consider my highest accomplishment. But God has given me amazing opportunities to use my creative gifts and talents over the years. And I grew up a little musician and sang a ton in church, and ended up I really had no idea I could write music. And so I became a singer songwriter and found, while we lived overseas, that I could do that. And I went from playing on the street, busking on the cobblestone streets, to playing at large venues in a year and a half, and achieved the #1 singer songwriter position on the Reverbnation charts in the Czech Republic.
Wow.
So it was a shock to me too, trust me. It was like, I've never had to be so brave in my life. But
I am sitting next to a superstar.
No, not at all.
And that is wow.
Well, it was something I'd always dreamed of, but never realized I actually had it in me to achieve. And kind of taking us away from our normal environment in the States and bringing us to a foreign country brought lots of new challenges into our lives, lots of processing, and songs they just flowed. And I just got out there on the street, overcame my fears, played, got used to people ignoring me, and then just kept going until I started drawing little crowds, and then it just grew and grew and grew from there in a very short period of time. So that was really a dream. And we can talk about later where to hear my music. But other parts of my creative history, I was a vocal coach for 10 years. I am, as you said earlier, an interior designer, residential interior designer. that does spaces that are very storytelling, very novel, intuitive, and authentic. I do very person-driven spaces, not only personality-driven, but really built around the actual person.
Uh-huh.
And then I became a best-selling author in April of last year in a book called Embracing Wisdom on the Walk. I tell my 25-year journey and my creative history and a lot of things that came out of that in my life.
Yeah. I am in awe.
Oh, no, please.
I am in awe. I am
Mhm.
in awe. I remember when I first met you, and then I started researching you a little bit because we started connecting, and I was reading about you, and I was like, wow, how in the world? She is amazing. I didn't know a lot of your story, which we're going to get into on tonight, because you are this creative, but you also suffer with you are bipolar.
Yes, ma'am.
And can you kind of explain what that is before we get into how you realized that you were? Can you kind of explain a little bit what it means to be bipolar?
Absolutely. That is something I never thought I would talk about. I mean, you know, a lot of people who suffer from bipolar disorder are multi-talented. They have a lot of creative ability. They have a lot of technical ability. Another thing I did in my history is I created the first scheduling system for trading megawatts of power at the inception of the industry in the 90s. I mean, we can be very brainy. I was fluent in French. I mean, people who suffer from bipolar disorder have some really crazy, amazing abilities. But managing the disorder is the key to being able to channel all those creative talents into actual productivity and real accomplishments. And one of my passions is sharing my story so that I can help people who suffer from this very difficult condition learn how to do that.
When did you realize that you were bipolar? When did you become diagnosed with it?
Well, I was not officially diagnosed with it until late in life. But when I was, everything about my life and my history
Started to make
made
sense.
sense completely. When I was a child, my mother used to say, Elizabeth has two speeds, zoom and off, period. They were either peeling me off the ceiling from excitement or they were finding me in my closet crying for no reason. I mean, it's been my whole life. It's just that it's hard to diagnose. It takes a while. People didn't really believe in all that back then or know what to call it. They just thought it's your personality. It's just the way she is. And I was making it through school and doing fine. I was raising my kids and doing fine. And, so it just, it's one of those things that finally got to the end of my rope and through a series of pretty severe struggles. I mean, and ended up in mental rehab and had to learn to start all over again with this new knowledge of this condition that I had. You really have to read the story. I have in the memoir Embracing Wisdom on the Walk, I'm chapter 11. It was like it's an anthology. So
Okay.
there are multiple authors. I'm chapter 11, and I condensed 25 years into 3,000 words and talk about the whole journey, all the creative things I've done, all the highs and lows I've had, my time of landing in a mental rehab facility, not even knowing that was where I was going, and it dawning on me that that was where I was. And I mean, it's a pretty dramatic story. It was a very dramatic experience, but I thank God that He arrested this condition in my life so that He could use me in a powerful way to help other people and teach me that you can overcome. You can still, I mean, so many people with this condition are train wrecks. Like, I am literally a walking miracle, having a 33-year marriage, two great kids who survived a bipolar mother who was not treated and not diagnosed while I was raising them. They should be on the show.
Really?
Talking, yeah.
Can you kind of give me some examples of some things that of some actual things that people can look for, can look at and say, okay, my loved one does that. And so now I'm understanding this, because as you say, a lot of people don't get diagnosed.
Yeah.
And what are some symptoms? What are some things that happen?
Well, I think 2 speeds zooming off is a pretty big telltale sign. Bipolar depression is different from clinically diagnosed depression because it has a flip side. What goes up must come down. What goes down must come up. It is a dysregulation of neurotransmitters. So it's not just a lack of serotonin. It's actually a dysregulation of the neurotransmitters. And it's like a flip-flop effect.
Really?
But, if they're spending a lot of time, my kids never knew which mom they were coming home to. If I was going to be the mom on the sofa that had been there all day, that got up to fix them a snack and went back to the sofa, or the mom that was in her music room writing music and doing all kinds of things and come on, do your homework, I mean, they just didn't know which one they were coming home. They can tell you all about that. But it's just by God's grace that they knew I loved them. And we still disciplined. They still had to respect us no matter how crazy I was. And it really all is by God's grace that I have been able to do the things that I have. And yeah, but I guess the telltale signs are just basically if you know someone who's just very excitable at times and then they're very withdrawn at times, they may be reclusive at times, but then they may open up and just be
like
a lot, the life of the party. Oh yeah, I walk in, lots of magnetism, lots of style, lots of charisma. Yes, that's, if you see really opposite sides, they're never like just, yeah, there's just really not much in between.
All the time is what you're saying.
Right.
But see, so how is that different from just a person who is depressed? How because people get diagnosed with depression all the time.
Yeah.
Is that a form of bipolarism?
Well, I don't know a lot about depression outside of the bipolar diagnosis. I was treated for that. They thought I was that for a long time. But because when you go to the psychiatrist or the psychologist, you don't typically talk about your happy times and how amazing the world is when you're manic. You're talking about what's bothering you, which is when you're depressed. And you hear a lot about depression, so you go and you say to the doctor, I'm depressed. And, they don't always ask you, well, are you ever manic? I mean, they just think, okay, here's a pill, you're depressed.
And, I don't know that people really can describe manic. Do you
well, you don't know anything's wrong with it. You don't know there's anything wrong with it because when you're manic, you feel amazing. I mean, it's just a euphoric feeling and you can do anything. You can save the world. God gives you parking spaces. Like everything is just happening all beautifully. Anything that was bothering you yesterday when you were in bed, it's all solved when you're manic. Like it's all going to be okay. And so you're not going to tell the doctor about that because you don't realize there's something wrong or abnormal about that. You just think that's your normal. And that's how I am. And so for me, I would spend 3 days on the sofa, right? And I would just be miserable, lonely, sad, just wanted to sleep all the time. And then I'd come back up again and start enjoying life again and just resurrect and just be this, go, 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 let's do this, the world's awesome. And I would think back to the 3 days on the sofa and go, oh, I was just tired. I just needed to sleep. I was fine. I was just tired.
And you've been like this your whole life?
Yes.
Even when you were a little girl, you were like this. And so it just became like, this is just normal Liz behavior.
Well, as a child, like if you have a child that you basically, as a child, it's not like you're like an adult, like on a sleep for 3 days. You're just very emotional. Kids are just like wear their emotions on their sleeve. So I was just highly, highly excitable as a kid and couldn't sleep. Not sleeping is huge.
Okay.
You cannot sleep for 3 nights in a row and still keep going. That's a big sign of mania, for example.
Okay.
But I could go on and on about symptoms and things. I know you want to get back to the attractive
I'm
distractions
so into what you're
thing.
saying right now. We're going to get to it. I got time.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's so many things. But what was I saying? So, yeah, if you have a little child that you think could be suffering from bipolar disorder, you're going to see more like super excitable or just staying in their room and just playing in their closet or crying a lot. And it's just going to be they're either that way, one way, or the other. And you might not even know they have a condition. And the other thing is, I was not medicated as a child, and I thank God I wasn't.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I could just be a child. It was okay to just be me and be super excited or just crying. It's okay. It's not like the end of the world as a child to be that way. And I do believe that children should grow and develop without medication if they can. And for me to have had that condition since I was so little is pretty rare. I mean, I think most people who truly suffer from bipolar disorder, they can be born with it and have it as a child, or maybe it doesn't show up till like their early 20s. I think that's more often the case. So leave your little child alone. Just be there, corral them, set boundaries, make sure they still respect you, and don't get onto their roller coaster. Just try to give them a routine. And
So is that how your mom handled you with your roller coasters, or even your husband and your children? Because I know you've been married for 30 something years, and your husband has had to learn how to take the roller coasters and roll with it. Bless his heart.
My husband is my complete opposite.
Really?
He is a calm, steady. I wrote a song about him that won an award in the International Singer Songwriters competition.
Every time you say
And
this,
it was
just
called King of Steady was the name of the song. You can hear it on Spotify. But he is steady Eddie. And he is just the kind of guy that I just look at him and he just calms me down. Like, I know the world's going to be okay. So he has been a gift from God. And my chapter in the book talks about a real crisis we had in our marriage related to my condition. But because of him being so merciful and so passionate about me, I think my passion drew him to me because he was so like kind of stoic. He's German and he's kind of stoic and strong work ethic. And so this kind of passionate woman comes along with all this energy and fire and who's crying, it's just all the passion. I think he was like, wow, because it was so foreign to him. And
Y'all
for
sound
him,
like a love story. You sound like a whole movie.
we could be.
It does. It sounds like a whole movie. And I'm so, like, you have got me just like drawn in. You like drawn me completely in. But I want to talk about, because you've gone through this experience, and this is part of your life. You're not separated from your disorder. It is part of your life.
Yeah.
And I love how you have allowed, instead of fighting it, you've allowed it to come in, and you've managed to manage it.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about, I remember a video that you had, 5 steps, about your 5 steps. Let's talk about your 5 steps for helping you do all the things that you do with this disorder. Go ahead and play your notes down, girl.
I got my notes because sometimes I forget one of the steps. But when you have a lot of talents and abilities, it's very easy to go, I want to write a song. And so you go to the piano and you start writing a song. And then you think, I want to write a book. I want to write this story. So you go over here and you kind of just your mind just wants to jump to all kinds of new projects at one time because your mind is just never stopping thinking. The wheels are never stop turning. So my story around this whole attractive distractions thing goes like this. I invested a lot of time and money and energy into certifications, education. I got some clients to become a really great residential interior designer. Okay. And nothing has been harder for me than to actually stick with this for some years.
Really?
Because there's always a glittery, shiny new project. Like, let's go make another record album. Let's do that. Let's write a whole Broadway musical with my story and my lyrics. Let's do that. I can do this design thing another time. Okay, so, and I thought I can do both. I can do my design business. I can write this book. I can create a musical out of it. I can, just go. And but you know what? My husband, I didn't say this earlier, but my husband suffered from brain cancer all of 2023. So part of my responsibility and why it's so important for me to stay on meds and manage my condition is that I now, in this season of our life, I have to be there for him. I have to be a somewhat of a caregiver for him. Not entirely. He's very self-sufficient, but he does have some deficiencies. Sometimes I have to do all the driving, for example. I kind of have to take care of a lot of things that he just doesn't have the cognitive ability to manage anymore. So all of that is to say, I could not, okay. And I also wanted to be an influencer, kind of like what I'm doing right now to support and help women who suffer from bipolar disorder. So I was going to do all these things at once. And I just have to give credit to my incredible therapist, Charles Graham. If you suffer from bipolar disorder, you need a very special, kind of highly educated PhD in psychology who works intentionally with those who suffer from bipolar disorder. And he said, Liz, let's talk about this. You cannot write a book. I mean, for about a year, like almost every therapy session for about a year was, Liz, you're an interior designer right now. That's what you're doing right now. And I'd be like, oh, really? But I want to go make this album. I want to go do this. I want to go travel. And he's like, Liz, you have clients, like you have projects. And he would say, God has given you these clients. Do you remember going to school? Do you remember paying $8,000 for that certification? And I'd be like, oh, okay. And it really took me at least a couple years. And then Dan had his brain cancer and I had to take a year off. So it's really taken me kind of a few years to dig my heels in and devote myself to this business 100%. And I think it's taken me that much time too, because you get better and better over time at managing your condition. So I think it's kind of taken me this much time to learn how to stick to one thing. And here are my tips that are really helpful.
And you know what we're going to do before you, because this is a really good point to stop so we can get into your tips. We're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, I want to hear your tips. We're going to talk about your tips. And we're also going to open up the conversation to our audience. So right now you can start putting questions in the chats that you may have for Liz. If y'all are mesmerized, like I'm mesmerized, I'm just sitting there eating up every word. But I want you to put some questions in the chat, and we're going to open it up and let you all join us in our conversation. But first, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about your tips. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
Right.
Hi, my name is Ashley Cherio, licensed clinical social worker, and I am the owner of Seeds of Healing Health and Wellness. It is an online telehealth therapy service that works with couples, young adults, and adolescents to be able to foster a healthy mental health in their day-to-day life. If you're struggling with anxiety, depression, life transitions, setting boundaries and relationship dynamics, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at my website, www.sohhaw.com, or you can email me at Ashley, ASHLEY, at SOH. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you and seeing how we both can work together in your mental health journey.
We are back. For those of you who are just joining us, I am joined by Liz Gabriel, interior designer, songwriter extraordinaire. She is also best-selling author who is here to share with us. We've been talking about her bipolar disorder and how she has been managing it, and now she's about to share with us the 5 tips that she has come up with to help her overcome the attractive distractions. And the distractions that you want to do, the things that you want to do are phenomenal, because I don't think anybody that I know has ever wanted to be distracted by writing a Broadway play or musical about their life. Those are some big distractions.
It's a very bipolar thing, right? I hear a lot of bipolar people say, I'm going to write a book. I mean, it's just a common kind of thing. We're just all crazy enough to actually think we can do these amazing things. And many of us do. I mean, there are people that are Theodore Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, Beethoven, Virginia Woolf, Van Gogh, Isaac Newton, Ernest Hemingway, Ted Turner, Mike Tyson. All of these people are people who suffer from bipolar disorder.
Really?
So you really can, do amazing things. And it just takes
it takes
you got to manage
discipline, and you have to, yes, you have to manage. So, because what you're about to share with us, it's not just limited to bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
Everybody has problems concentrating and not being distracted, like by anything and everything. So this helps everybody, including myself, because we have big dreams and God puts us on assignment. And sometimes you gotta kill the noise, the outside noise around you, so that you can stay on assignment.
Absolutely.
And you are about to give us some tips. And this is what I mean. I like this. I like a checklist. Tanya's on, and me and Tanya, we like a checklist. You're about to give us a checklist on how to stay on assignment.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. And that is the key, is being able to distinguish that path forward and not left, right, taking the forks in the road. Okay, and the way I want to put this is, when you're thinking about a new project, you're basically in decision mode. So this is really more like 5 tips for helping you make safe, good decisions and knowing whether the decision to chase that glittery new project is a good one or just an attractive distraction. So first of all, your decision has to make common sense.
Okay.
It can't be just, not so. It has to make common sense, not just to you, but to others. It must give you peace. Something can make sense on a certain level, but it still may not give you peace inside. I mean, you can be very excited about it. You can be very attractive to it, but there's some little voice inside it's disrupting your peace. So you got to be real in tune with yourself, externally and internally, when it comes to making decisions. And I'd like to share a story about that in a minute, if you remind me.
Okay.
So your idea needs to be encouraged by others. People who love you and are objective in your life, when you share this idea with them, you need to hear them say, I think that's great. Because if they look at you like, I don't think you can do that right now, then it might not be. And I'm not talking about naysayers or mockers. There are people that are going to think you're nuts anyway. But
people like your therapist, who's like,
my husband, yes, close family member, a close friend who I really trust, that I know, people that love you and have your best interest at heart need to be on board with you and supporting you for you to know this is a safe and good direction. It cannot compromise your personal well-being. Some people who have bipolar disorder, in particular, a big part of managing the condition is a sound routine of self-care, staying on a schedule, and that is very difficult. Like things like eating 3 meals a day, getting a good night's sleep, those are very difficult for people who suffer following a calendar. Those are very difficult things for a person who suffers from bipolar disorder to do. That kind of stuff is just innate to the rest of the world, but we have to work hard to do those normal things. And if you're going to jump off the deep end into this glittery project that's going to emaciate your whole routine and ruin your, because when you stop taking care of yourself, you will end up in depression, without a doubt. And depression for people who suffer from bipolar disorder is a very dangerous depression. And the thing is, let me just say the last one.
Okay.
Your decision cannot compromise your responsibility to those you've been given to care for, your children, your spouse, your aging parents, whoever you know, you have a role, like your role is to take care of them. So I want to tell a story about this. When I was, this is part of the crisis we had in our marriage back in 2015, I thought I was going to go and be a rock star in New York. Like I really thought this. Oh, by the way, if the decision is causing you to compromise the responsibilities you have to others, that is, and you're going that way, that is probably one of the first indications that you're beginning to lose touch with reality. So I was losing touch with reality. I was recording an album. I had found this guy that I thought he wasn't going to, but I had built up this scenario in my mind where I thought he was going to take me to New York City and I was going to become like a rock star and just sing, not rock and roll. I'm not really a rocking kind of, I'm more, definitely more a mellow singer songwriter, but still I thought I was going to have hit songs and do all this. And but I had this little voice in the back of my mind saying, like a faint voice in the back of my mind saying, you have 2 children. You have 2 children. You cannot run off to New York. And it was like the Holy Spirit going, come on, wake up. You can't do this. This is not a good decision to fly off with some guy and go be a rock star. You have children. They got to eat dinner. They need help with their homework. I mean, that was a point where I was really untreated, undiagnosed, untreated, and just kind of losing touch with reality. So I look back on that today, and that's just an example of how if you have these principles in place in your life, you're not going to go become a train wreck. These kinds of things have kept me. My number one thing that's kept me from being a train wreck is a regular walk with the Lord. That's absolutely number one.
Because that was going to be my question, and I want to say this. I don't want to, because I want to come back to your list. But I was going to ask you how your relationship with God has has helped you maintain your level.
Well, keep me from being a train wreck. Bottom line. Oh yeah, for sure. Because so I was raised in a Christian household, and I learned the Bible, and even as a child. So another thing about people who suffer from bipolar disorder, they can be deeply spiritual and feel things. I mean, think about it. Your emotions are just kind of you're very, very sensitive, very intuitive. I personally am very empathic. And I do think that the deep spirituality is somewhat the effect of the deep level emotion that I feel and that we feel. I would love to hear what other bipolar people have to say about that. So even as a child, I really felt like I had this little relationship with the Spirit of God. And just from a practical standpoint, having that relationship, you know, I was taught biblical principles for life. There's a lot of great guardrails for our lives in the Word of God. And I was raised in a family that set boundaries around me as a child and taught me about safety. And so I wanted to be, and not everyone's like this. I was kind of a compliant, even though I had these ups and downs, I was a compliant child. I wanted to be a good person. I wanted to be safe. I loved God. I wanted to please him. So that's kind of where it started in my childhood. But as I grew and grew, it's just been a habit for me every single morning to start the day in prayer, start the day in the Word. And that in itself keeps you stable. I mean, at least you're starting. You may not stay stable all day, but at least you're starting in a stable place.
I
And
agree.
you really need that. Everybody needs that, whether you suffer from bipolar or any mental condition or not. You need that. And some days you may be crying and begging God to take your pain away. I mean, it doesn't mean you're always just reading a nice little chapter and saying your little prayers and going on with your day. I mean, you got to be gut-wrenching honest with God.
Yeah.
And that has really helped. The moral code that I was raised with, oh my God, I wish everyone had the incredible, safe moral code that I was raised with. I think that is a huge part of why I am not a train wreck today. That's huge.
I want to talk a little bit more about your, but I want to make sure that I get questions that are coming in. What are the 3 most important lessons you've learned on your journey, and how has your faith been shaped through it?
Well, that's a great question. I am terrible about top 3 kind of things, or like I'd have to really think about, 1, 2, and 3. But I've learned that God is faithful, that life is hard, but that he's faithful. I've also learned that life is long. There's like everyone says, oh, life is short. You know what? Life is long, and there are plenty of opportunities to recoup, to start over, to get it right, and do it again, to learn new things to apply. So those are some of the I guess that would be my top 2, maybe.
Actually, that is actually great, because and it's really good. I've never heard anybody describe it like that. That life is long. I don't think we think about things on that level. But so let's talk about and y'all keep asking your questions. I'll put them in. I'll get to them as they come in. Let's talk about I want to recap your 5. And these are 5 decisions. These are 5 things to think about to help you when you're making your decision and staying faithful to your decision and keep from going off the railing.
Yeah.
Okay?
Common sense.
Common sense. Let's. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Name them real quick.
Yeah, it needs to make common sense. Internally, it needs to give you peace. Like I said, even if it makes sense on a certain level, if it doesn't give you peace, it's probably not a good decision. It needs to make sense to your loved ones, to those who know, have your best interest in mind. It needs to make sense to them, and they should be something they can encourage and get behind. It needs to not compromise your routine of self-care. It's incredibly important, because you will end up being worthless if you compromise that. And lastly, it cannot compromise your responsibility to those you must care for.
And that last one is so wow. Okay.
Well, you hear about parents who suffer from bipolar disorder and abandon their kids, don't feed their kids. You hear children who have had parents that have had this condition. And I did a video a couple weeks ago on how not to forget to feed your dog. I have my dog's bowl where I can see it, where I walk by it in the kitchen every day and I can see if it's empty. Like my eyes have to naturally, I love my dog. I mean, I love him. He is my #1 best friend. But if my mind is racing, or if I'm like down and out, I might forget to feed it because I have this condition.
Wow.
And so this is, that's why I say, if you're going to make a decision, make sure it doesn't compromise your responsibility to those that you have to care for. Because when you suffer with this condition, it's hard enough to stay on top of that. Like, we have to give ourselves reminders and stay in the present and be available to those we love. And that can be hard.
And then you see all of these other things that are happening, and your mind begins to wonder, like, oh, I can go do that. I can go do that. I can go do that. And then now you've gotten off track, and you're no longer focusing on the ones that you have been given responsibility to care about. And let's talk about some. What are some? Well, you did talk about one of the ones that dreams that did not make, quote unquote, common sense. Let's talk about that. Because a lot of people will say, like, well, what do you mean by that don't make common sense? You know how people say it may not make sense to others, but it makes sense to me. And I think what you're saying is, when you suffer from bipolar disorder, you have to be careful about stepping into those spaces of, well, this don't make, this big wow thing that I'm about to do. And it may not be, I'm just to go, build an AI machine or something like that, but it could be something along the lines of, oh, now I've decided I'm just to walk to Thailand or something, something to that effect. And you're like, honey, that don't make, that's just not making sense.
Right. I mean, in my case, I think it just didn't make sense to actually think I could accomplish all of these things at one time. I wrote my memoir in this book, and I only had 3,000 words, and there was so much more I wanted to write. I mean, we lived in a haunted house. I've got ghost stories. I mean, I've just got all kinds of, like, I just have so much drama and interest and fun in my life that I think would be a blast to write a book about. And then on top of that, I have all these songs that were inspired by all these things that would go in the book. It just.
And do you think you found yourself in the midst of all of these amazing situations because of your condition?
My condition.
I feel that I don't want to say it like that, but I don't know what else to say, because of your condition.
I would say some and some. Most of it is just because we moved a lot with my husband's job. So we lived in lots of different houses and lots of different locations. And so we were always starting over and having new adventures. So a lot of it was just that. Okay.
Well, I love that you didn't shy away from new adventures.
Oh, no, never.
I mean, and that's real easy to do. And you didn't shy away from it. So, and don't get me wrong, being bipolar, there's a lot of things that you have to manage. But can you tell me, and you've told me a lot of the, and I'm not going to say bad things, but some of the worst case things that can happen if you are not properly managing this. What are some benefits of this disorder?
Well, if it's managed, you can do a lot of amazing things to help push the world forward. Like, I listed all those people that we all know the names of, and the incredible accomplishments they had and the inspiration they were. They had this condition, but they weren't a train wreck. Maybe they were, but they got back on track. And they got done what they were meant to do, So it's a tragedy to be a person who was made with these ups and downs, but that has all this gifting and talent. And to watch that just not get used because you get stuck in a loop of, new glittery shiny things, and you jump ship and you jump ship and you jump ship. And then you end up depressed and good for nothing and good for no one. If you can capture this talent and this brain power and this intellect and creativity, you can really do some amazing things. That's my prayer for my life. I mean, I spent a lot of my life untreated. Yes, I was able to get some really cool things done during those years, and I praise God for that. But I spent many, many years just depressed, like in between pockets of just depression where I got nothing done. And it was hard. It's so deeply, deeply, deeply painful to suffer from depression when you're bipolar disorder, when you have bipolar disorder. So I guess all that, just to sum it up, is we have a lot of capacity to give a lot to the world. And if I can help people who suffer learn to manage their condition, then that's going to heal not only them, but the people's lives that they touch, and also empower them to do the things they were made to do and fulfill a purpose.
Knowing what you know now, what would you say to your younger self, to a younger version of yourself, if you were sitting across from her right now?
I have so been in touch with my inner child. I wrote a song called Lullabies that y'all have to hear. It's on Spotify. It is a very orchestral, Broadway-esque song of me speaking to this inner child. And I would just tell her she's awesome, that she's accepted the way she is, and she's lovable, and she's smart, and she needs to hang in there when she's sad and know that there is a bigger plan for her life. So,
what would you tell somebody who is right now suffering from bipolarism and they're having a hard time getting a hold of it, living and functioning and going forward? What is something you would tell them, and what is something that they can start doing right now?
well, with every mental illness, there is a choice component. It may be very, very difficult to make the choices you need to get out of bed and lick this thing, but you do have the choice. And, you know, I did a video on my lifestyle handle recently about an episode of depression I had where I could not, and I'm medicated and everything, and I could not get out of bed. And I talked to my therapist, and he said, you've got to get out of bed. You've got to get out of bed at the same time every morning. You've got to go to bed at the same time every night, and you must not sleep during the day. So I guess what I would tell someone is I wouldn't really tell them what to do, but I would tell them what I did in that instance and what I do when I get into that position. I get my husband to come in the bedroom at 7 a.m., rip the blankets off of me, open the window, start talking to me, bring me coffee, and get me out of bed. And the rest of the day, I have a to-do list and I get it done. I run a business. I cannot sleep all day. People are counting on me. I've got installs. I've got stuff going on. I mean, I can be dying in the middle of the day to just go to sleep and take a nap. And when you're depressed and you suffer from bipolar, your whole body is just in bad shape. I mean, you have aches and pains. You just have, it's just all bad, 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 bad. And so it takes literally everything in me to get up on those days and fight the urge to sleep, fight the urge to go downhill, and stay awake until 10 o'clock bedtime when I can finally go sleep my pain away. And then I get up and I do it all over again. It takes about 3 days of hardcore pushing through that to snap out of your depression and get back up. It is hard. But you cannot, if you are not on medicine, you will not be able to do that, period. You will not have the strength. You've got to stay on the journey of being properly medicated until you get that right. If you want to have a hope of doing what I'm describing that I do to keep going.
So how and what would you say to people who are caring for people with bipolar disorder, whether they know it or they've been diagnosed and are acknowledging it or not. But I mean, because your life doesn't just affect you, and your decisions don't just affect you.
Right.
And the way that you get distracted by all of these big, glorious things, I'm supposed to run off to New York, and your distractions are huge. And I refuse distractions like that. Your distractions are huge and they are amazing. But what do you say, what do you say to the people who love you and are living with this with you, because you're not living this by yourself?
Right. So I think what you're asking is, if you have a loved one who suffers from this, or a family member, especially if you live with them, how can you support them and encourage them? How can you give them some self-awareness, maybe?
Yes, both of those.
That's huge. So it was suggested a couple of times in my journey to diagnosis that I might be bipolar. And I was like, what? No, I am not. This is just who I am. I mean, I did not believe it at all. I didn't properly answer your earlier question. I did not get diagnosed properly until I was 50 years old, landed in rehab in residence for 5 weeks, separated from my family for a total of 4 months while my poor kids were teenagers. They did an intervention on me, and that's how I ended up there. And what was I going to say? And so that's what it took for me to finally understand, I have an illness. This is not normal. Like it really. And so what they did up until then, suffer, that you don't want to get on that person's roller coaster with them. You must not allow yourself to do that. You need to be merciful, non-judgmental. You need to be kind. You need to be understanding. But you need to set boundaries for yourself. And you need to set boundaries, especially if it's a child, you need to set boundaries around them. And, psychologists can really help you learn to do that. But some of those boundaries would be to really encourage and help those people, like my husband ripping the sheets off the bed and helping me get up and get going. That's something you can help them do. Making sure they get 3 square meals a day, helping them not sleep during the day. Like, get them up, get them out on a walk with you, get them to do things that, brighten their spirits when they are, feeling down. And, when they're manic, maybe say, hey, come, let's just watch this movie. Let's just have a quiet evening together. Tell them, I really need a friend tonight. Will you just sit with me tonight? Help them do sort of the opposite of what their inclination is at the time. And if you suspect they suffer from bipolar, but you don't know that for sure, and you don't know how to tell them, there's a lot of ways to handle that. One of them and I am not a doctor, and I think some doctors would not appreciate me saying this, but I'm just going to say it
Based on your experience.
Because it's based on my experience. There's a book called if I can say it, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Mood Disorders, the DSM-5. There are tables in that book, and this is the book the doctors use to diagnose someone. And you can look for bipolar type 1, bipolar type 2. There is a difference. But there's a table with a list of depressive symptoms and a table with a list of manic symptoms. And if you think, gosh, I'm going to look this up because I think Sally over here is bipolar, You go through that table, and if you can check off the majority of symptoms on both sides that you witness that they have, then you can show that to them in black and white. That's what it took for me to see it objectively. You're not diagnosing them. You are not, I am not saying you should do that and diagnose them.
But just
I'm
help them
saying that
become aware.
you could use it as a tool to kind of help them see themselves and then get them to a doctor.
Liz, thank you so much. Our time is up. I know and I know it doesn't feel like it, but we've been talking for an hour. I want to thank you so much for coming and sitting down with me and all of this rich information and these 5 tips, which I promise you, they are not just limited to people with bipolar. They are so powerful with helping us live our life. And I want you to look into this camera and talk directly to our audience. I want you to just run through those tips one more time and then tell people how they can connect with you if they want to work with you, what else you got going on, how they can find your music, find this Broadway play that you done wrote or that you're thinking about writing. But let them know how they can connect with you. You got 2 minutes.
Okay, so the decisions you're thinking about making, they need to make common sense. They need to not compromise your routine of self-care. They need to not compromise the responsibilities that you have to those you've been given to care for. And what are the other 2? Oh, they need to give you peace. Can't remember the last one. Okay. You had to have listened to that earlier now. You can go watch a video on that on my Liz Gabriel lifestyle handle on Instagram. I have a video that details all of it. But you can follow me on Instagram at Liz Gabriel Lifestyle. My interior design business is Instagram at Liz Gabriel Interiors. And Facebook, I'm just Liz Gabriel, aka Liz Zelke, my personal page. I keep it public because I share all. Spotify, Liz Gabriel, music artist. You want to hear my music? And the book is Embracing Wisdom on the Walk.
And I'll make sure that we put a link for all of this in our show notes. I want to thank you again so much for joining me on tonight and helping us, giving us the tips that we need to help us reach our goals and stay focused. I cannot tell you how important what you have said tonight really is. I appreciate you for being so open and so vulnerable and so loving and so graceful. I just really and truly appreciate you.
Glory to God.
I hope that you have received something on tonight that has helped you. I want you to take these 5 tips and go and focus, create discipline in your life so that you can take your life from where you are now to where you want to go. Join us next week. We are meeting the author. Carla Erskine, the author of Balancing Acts, will be in the studio talking with us about how to bridge that gap between the vision and the realization of the vision. So make sure you join us every Wednesday night here on the Win-Win Women.tv network for new episodes, new conversations to inspire, uplift, and help you as you transform your life. Until next week, I love you and go be great.